Survivor specialist John and McKenna are back one last time to talk the finale of Survivor 48. It was a time.
It was a time. Season 48 was certainly a time in Survivor history. I think, you know what? I think yesterday there were a lot of emotions going on about the season. A lot of people really jumping to the conclusion this is one of the worst seasons ever, that it's easily like the worst season of the new era. But I don't think that's the case. I think now, having a whole almost 24 hours since the conclusion of it, McKenna, we've had a little bit of time to adjust it. So what are your final thoughts on 48?
My final thoughts on 48 are I think Survivor did the cast of 48 dirty with some of the editing choices that they made, but I love so much of the season 48 cast that I would love to see them play again. I think the whole cast brought it for gameplay and for character moments and the whole 9 yards. I think just this cast was so good and I fell in love with the cast. So I just think some choices on the back end were not favorable to them. Like Kyle wins, but he's not in any of the final tribal council.
No, I think that's overstepping a little bit. There's one question in the final tribal council that Kyle doesn't answer, but I definitely understand what you're saying.
It just feels like he is the afterthought in FTC. Like I came out of that being like Eva.
Yeah, so, I think a lot of people were. Phil said, like, I mean, I texted Phil during Final Tribal Council being like, I don't know if Kyle's really got this. Apparently Will was doing the same during it. And it was just one of those instances where everyone was kind of like, what's going on with the edit here in Final Tribal Council?
Yeah. But we still have business to attend to here in the Survivor Rewind. We have to deal with our Outwit, Outplay, and Outlast moments of the finale. So let's talk Outwit moments. And we're talking winners playing the middle. Here we have Kyle playing this very middle ground game where he has alliances on both sides of the fence and he is navigating it perfectly, where he is not getting fingers pointed at him. He is just, cruising right on through and being able to make moves that benefit him and let people on this side go, let people on that side go, and kind of keep him and his true, real close alliances pushing on forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's too soon to fully declare this, as people are wont to do as soon as the episode ends, as soon as the season ends. I think it's a little too soon to really dissect Kyle's game and where it kind of fits amongst the new era winners and let alone all Survivor winners. But what we saw was a very, very strong game from Kyle. I don't think there's any denying that at this point. And his ability to navigate that middle position, to never be a threat to go home. There was one point in the entire game where it felt like Kyle could go home. That was on that first swap tribe, or on that swap tribe when he, of course, did get votes and had to use the idol to save himself. Right. Aside from that, never really felt like he was at risk of going home in this game.
Yeah, true. Because his vote to many people was so crucial. A lot of people came to him and be like, if we can flip Kyle, Kyle votes with us, if Kyle this, Kyle that. And so he was able to navigate the game because he was always needed.
Yeah, and it's a position that's really hard to play in Survivor. It is one that I think we like to think a lot of survivors are able to do this. But in the end, not many do. A lot of the times when we see winners of Survivor, they end up having that strong alliance against their end. And yes, Kyle obviously had a very strong alliance with not only Camilla, but also with Joe, with Eva, with David, as we see in like his exit press today. He had these strong connections throughout, and that's what's so impressive about him. Is like, and this is again where I want to echo what you said, McKenna. Like, the editors kind of did this cast dirty because we did not get to see the social connections that this cast deserved to be shown. Because, I mean, throughout the finale, right? Like throughout the last couple of weeks, we kind of keep hearing, yeah, Mitch is kind of a threat to win the game because of his social connections. And Mitch said
Yeah.
it in his exit interview with Phil earlier, right? Like he focused on his social connections. He made sure everyone there liked him
Hmm.
and would be wanting to vote for him come the end of the game. So we see all of this and we see Kyle doing this too, but the edit didn't really show this all to us,
Hmm.
unfortunately, and it made it really difficult for us as viewers. And I think this is a lot of the reason why people are low on this season. Yes, there was the predictability of like the Star and Mary boot, but how much more interesting could those episodes have been if they were building up these relationships that were happening with the rest of the cast and even the people who were going home there, right?
Hmm.
That type of and it's weird because I've said it throughout this season. We spent the last couple of seasons really praising the editors of Survivor, and this is the first time I felt that they've really fumbled the ball, probably since 41, where we don't really get the full picture of what's happening on the island. And with 90-minute episodes, I find it just like a little inexcusable for us not to get more of these moments where we're really building up other relationships when all we did was like we kind of focused on a couple of things, right? We focused on Kyle's secret relationship with Camilla. We focused on the very obvious relationship between Joe and Eva. But because of that, we kind of lost some of these very compelling characters to the background.
Hmm. Yeah. And they have clearly, been able to showcase a middle ground, like person playing the middle, because we have two examples here, and
Mhm.
we'll get into the first one, which is Sarah in Game Changers. She had many alliances and was trying to navigate them. You had like the Cerie side of things, you had the Brad side of things. And then there was the divide between Andrea and Zeke, who were also part of her alliance. So she was able to navigate all of these relationships and even cut some of her closest allies to put them on the jury and get herself further and get their votes in the end.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing we always hear about Sarah's Game Changers game is that she was everyone's best friend out there. She just makes you feel so comfortable. And this is a bunch of returning players, right? These are
Mhm.
savvy players who are out there playing the game with her again. I mean, I know. Okay, we can shit on the Game Changers cast as much as we want. They are all still savvy Survivor players. It's why they're playing the game a second time. And Sarah kind of plays them all like a fiddle by just being friends with them.
Mhm.
And again, this is something that I think is really what Kyle did, right? This is exactly what Kyle did, played it, but the way Sarah changes this formula, or the way that Sarah kind of set this formula, because it happened in the past, Sarah utilized knowledge of advantages a lot more than Kyle did,
Yeah.
right? Like, yes, Eva had an idol, and we saw in Camilla's exit press that like we don't care if Eva has the idol, because if Eva has the idol, at least we know where it is and we know she's only using it on one of two people. But Sarah used the advantage of like knowing about Sierra's
Save
legacy advantage
legacy
and getting
advantage.
and voting her out because she knows it's going to come to her, knowing where all these idols are, using the steal a vote that she knows is non-transferable, giving it over to Cerie to hold, knowing that she can't use it as power, but she can kind of use it as a way of like
Leverage.
promising
Yeah.
her, yeah, like promising her alliance, her allegiance to her. And that's where the difference is between Kyle and Sarah's game, I think, because I think from a personal standpoint, they did this. Kyle was in a position where everyone wanted to work with him and everyone could work with him. I think we
Mhm.
see a lot of times where people get into a position where everyone likes them in the game. Someone like Mitch, right? Everyone
Yeah.
liked Mitch. Was everyone willing to work with Mitch? We don't know because the edit didn't really show us. But Sarah was someone who everyone was wanting to work with because she
Mhm.
made everyone feel like the most important person when she spoke to them.
Yeah. Sarah's Game Changers game is one of my favorites. I think she played an amazing game in Game Changers, and I was rooting for her the whole time to make it forward. And it's so interesting because Kyle was able to play this style of game on his first try,
Mhm.
where Sarah adapted her previous game into playing this middle. And I'm not gonna say she's the first one to do it, but it is a but as we were going through a lot of the seasons, we saw clear lines and adversaries. So there are some arguments for maybe someone like Bob in Gabon, where he played kind of a middle game. But I think Sarah is one of the first that come to mind when you say rode the middle and played hard and well.
I think one of the hard things with this topic in general is defining what the middle is. Because
Mhm.
a lot of the times we do have, like you said, in a lot of early seasons, we kind of have adversarial forces going at each other, right? Like going all the way back to Borneo, you just have Pagong and Tagi going back and or
Right.
going at each other, right? You have, and this kind of continues for a very long time,
Or
even when
you
we
have
get to
like Aris and Terry, where there's like one person going after, another
Mhm.
person.
Yeah, there's just these two adversarial forces that are kind of going into each other. Even when we get into like token genes, where like yes, you could argue JT kind of plays the middle, but it's more like presented in a
Duty.
way where he's a side
Mhm.
opposed to another side,
Yeah.
but it's just not as obvious in game.
Mhm.
And we see even in say like the Philippines final tribal council where it's mentioned that Denise plays a real middle game. It's like, yeah, okay, Denise kind of plays a middle game because she was one of two people from a single tribe that got decimated and then had to work with people from the two other tribes for the rest of the game. Is that really the middle? It's hard to say. Whereas Sarah seems to very intentionally be
Vote
spending
people
time.
off and like
Yeah.
strategically like play all right, one from you. I can let you go, but you I'm going to fight to stay and work some magic somewhere else. And she eventually, does whittle down to Brad and Troyzan, but I mean, voting out Sierra Dawn Thomas, who was in tight with Brad and Troyzan and herself, being able to vote her out and let her go was, one of those like middling moves where she gives almost a number to like the Suri side of things.
Yeah, but at the same time, like she's doing it to get a specific advantage that she knows
Mhm.
exists in the game so that she can have it for what turns out to be a very pivotal vote to have that advantage at.
Yeah.
And on top of that, she's also putting someone that she knows is going to advocate for her on the jury
Mhm.
no matter what.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and that I again, that's what we see with Kyle and Camilla in this finale, right? Like
Mhm.
both of them are like they talk about the splitting of votes, but they also just want that person there preaching to
Mhm.
the jury for them so that
Yeah.
they like just that little bit of buildup, right? We saw when Sam was on the predictions and power rankings that he says like that 7-6 position is so important in the game because that's the person who's seen enough of the game and is with the jury long enough to
Mm.
really say how things are going. Where you know, at this point, like 4 might be a little too late, but it's still probably enough just to like poke and prod things in the direction of Kyle over Joe and Eva here.
And then we also have Tommy in Island of the Idols. Um, and he played a great middling game, I feel, because he is this like looming large, charismatic guy who should be one of the targets, but he's able to kind of set himself back and fall in line almost. And he has his alliances with like Lauren and Janet from his original tribe. Then he forms bonds with like Elaine, Dean, and kind of moves forward where they were eliminating, one tribe, but he had like his certain people that he was helping that were helping maneuver him and covering him throughout the game.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when you look at a chart of like vote out orders and it shows all the same color from a starting tribe, it doesn't really paint the full picture of how the game's going, right?
Mhm.
And Island of the Idols does feel like one where it doesn't feel like one side's picking off the other. It kind of more feels like this homogenized group that's kind of like ebbing and flowing and making it work. And Tommy's ability to play into all of these different relationships, build them to the point where like, he can convince Nora that he's so bad at fire making they shouldn't even put him in it
Right.
because he's just going to lose to Lauren and Lauren's going to win the game. But you also have this aspect that I think Tommy's game is very similar to Kyle's because he's also kind of like beneficial or like is a beneficiary of who's on the cast with him at the same time, where Kyle on a lot of seasons, yes, like he goes in talking about being like the average guy, is still a very athletic man,
Mhm.
right? But on a season with David and Joe and Mitch being able to sink a ball in one shot no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, Mitch was always right on tails in, like, an obstacle course or whatever was going on, like, I definitely Mitch was no slouch in challenges. Eva, like, a lot of people
Mhm.
were challenge beasts and pro challenges.
Yeah, and Kyle kind of benefits from not being that tall blade of grass that we hear talked about in Survivor so much, right?
Mhm.
Like that idea of like not sticking out as too obvious the challenge threat because anyone on this season could really. I mean, we saw it in the finale, right? Camilla comes back from behind, and because there's a puzzle, the puzzle was actually the great equalizer, and Camilla is able to win the final 5 challenge because of it.
Mhm.
And Tommy's very similar. Now, Tommy never wins an individual immunity challenge. Tommy like has no advantages throughout the game, but Tommy is also someone who, again, has that type of physique. You think he would excel at these challenges and stuff, but in the early merge, like you have like Aaron Meredith there, who's this massive tank of a man,
Yeah.
and then later on, Dean's just kind of there as a big threat too, right?
Mhm.
So Tommy's never the really obvious target, and because he's focusing so much on a social game, he because he's not winning these challenges, because he's not getting advantages. He was the only person on the entire cast not to go to Island of the Idols. Like these are the things that make it so that why his game is so impressive because he is able to sit in the middle. He was able to navigate, and even when you get to the final 5 vote, which is like
Mhm.
the pivotal vote in that season where Janet has the idol, Dean has the idol nullifier. Ultimately, like Tommy's the one who's kind of deciding, like, yes, okay, Dean gets to play it and decide whether or not Janet goes or Dean goes, but Tommy's kind of that in that position to kind of go either way, no matter what
Mhm.
happens there.
Right, exactly. Like, he is, 'cause was always kind of in that driver's seat without he was like either a passenger or a backseat driver where he was saying the directions and they were going the directions, but like wasn't the one that driving force that people were like, oh, we've got to get you out. So he wasn't in the Joe where Joe was like, oh, we have to get Joe out kind of situation.
Exactly. And again, the similarities to Kyle are very prominent here because, right, Kyle, we saw at that Shaheen vote at the final 6, right? Kyle took an instance, was able to manipulate the people in the game to think the way he wanted them to. If you haven't seen Joe's, I just get to keep referencing all of the exit press that Phil did earlier. Joe mentions in his exit press that Shaheen and him happened to have a fight that day. And Kyle was able to capitalize on that to get this paranoia going in
Mhm.
Joe that Shaheen was going to target him and Eva. So those are the type of social relationships you build and those type of moments you get to capitalize. And both Kyle and Tommy did it so well, just based on being able to read the cast and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Um, I love a middling game. And I think middle games are so hard to pull off. So it was fun to see that play out for sure.
I just wish we saw Kyle communicating with the other side beyond Camilla a little bit more. And
Mm.
again, I am never blaming the cast of this season. I am only blaming the editors of this because I know that was happening because we have everyone telling us it was happening, but we just didn't see it.
Yeah. All right, we are getting into our outplay moment of the week, and it is feeding your competitors. So the final reward the last few seasons and in seasons past has been food. And so what do you do when choosing someone to go on that reward with you? Do you take your closest ally? So for Camilla, it's Kyle. Do you take him, but then you're fueling him when you think you might want to get him out? Do you take someone like Eva, who is a strong physical presence, but if she wins, it's probably okay? So where kind of do your lines go with taking those competitors on this food reward?
This is a really difficult because I mean we've talked about rewards in the past. We've talked about like loved ones, and we specifically one of the topics we covered previously is this idea of like who you choose to take on a reward and the strategy behind that. It gets so much harder at the pointy end of the stick where we're at here, right? At
Mhm.
Final Five, I'm just glad that it was only one person that Camilla got to take because
Yeah.
there have been many seasons in the past where it's or at least in the new era where it's an even number of people. And in this way, it's like you have immunity, Camilla. You can
Well,
take
it's at
one person.
5, so it couldn't have been even.
Well, I know that's what I'm saying. Like this is five. In previous examples, like it's been at six and everything like
Oh.
that. But at five, you take someone, and now you're could literally be painting a target on that person too, because you are
Mhm.
leaving three people, a majority, on the other side, and they literally can only really say, "Okay, so we're voting for this person they took because you have immunity."
Yeah. That's also a possibility because they're fed. Will that food influence the final challenge? So, their brains are deprived and kind of mushy a little bit, giving food refuels and everything like that. And you're able to focus a bit better. But this final challenge, with Samotion, I feel as if the food doesn't matter as much as it would if it's puzzle steps.
Sure, like something like very physical, you mean?
Right.
I don't know. It's a good question because I the hardest thing about it is like that mental clarity can really help you with emotion, but it's
Correct.
going to depend on the individual as well, right? Like if you're
Mhm.
someone who hyper focuses, having that food in there, that little bit of sustenance might help you. Granted, it's also a day before you're doing that challenge.
Mhm.
And like that might be almost worse for some people, where having that sustenance then makes it so that you're like, my body is craving sustenance now and I can't focus at all.
Yeah. So we're gonna go with one of our examples in China. Um, Amanda wins the final reward, and it's a pizza. She can enjoy this pizza and have all of it, or she can take one person, or she can take two people. So now here's an option of how many of your competitors do you feed? Or do you feed none of them and then kind of look like a dick?
Yeah, this I think is the best example we've ever had in Survivor of this because this is production putting it on the players. And what do we always ask for? Production, just put it on the players. Make the players make the decisions here,
Mhm.
right? Like, okay, you can take one, you can take two. It's your choice. I think in the new era, we would often see people take two. I think that's just kind of where we are in Survivor, where people would like share the love as much as possible. It's not like San Juan del Sur, where people are giving up their rewards for everyone all the time. But I think now, I don't know if this twist would work. But what was so interesting about this was the final five or the final four when Amanda had
Of
this. China.
China. Um, it was the final 5, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. So at that point, again, it's like you're taking one person. And it's also very important to remember this is a reward challenge, not a reward and immunity challenge.
Mhm.
So
You're
that
fueling
also,
someone directly for the immunity challenge.
and on top of that, like you're also, you might be taking someone away. Like we were talking about, like Camilla could kind of technically be putting a target on Eva by pulling her away from a majority if she didn't have a close ally who was there who would never vote for her.
Mm,
But you that could be there, but without immunity being determined, that type of conversation doesn't really happen. Yeah, it can be spitballing, but it would never be solidified in that instance.
yeah.
But taking a majority there might also just upset the other two too much. So it's a really interesting game to be played. And Amanda, I don't know if she made the right decision here. Like I really honestly don't know. Now who she ends up taking ends up going on to win the game,
Mhm.
but I think like the only wrong decision here is to do it just by yourself.
Yeah. But then again, could people fault you for just eating by yourself? I don't know. I feel like there's a catch which with each answer. And
100%.
that's what's beautiful about this question that Jeff gives Amanda of, do you want it for yourself? Fuel only you? Do you want it for one other person? But then at the same time, if you only pick one person, you're purposefully leaving out a second.
Mhm.
Or do you all have less food by bringing another person with you?
Yeah, it's a tricky decision. And on top of that, it's really driven by this idea of what is best for me moving forward. And I think it really depends on your current position in the game. If we're talking like this situation comes up in Panama, and this type of situation didn't come up in earlier seasons because the last reward was the car.
Mhm.
So it didn't quite come up. Yes, the car usually involved like a trip with food and everything, but like this type of decision wouldn't have come up then. But if
Right.
you're in Panama and Terry wins this, does Terry share it with anyone? I think he's in a
Mm-mm.
social position where it doesn't make sense for him to do so, right?
Right.
But if you're playing a more social strategic game like Amanda is, it does make more sense to have these bonds here, especially if you're, I think, obviously, like Amanda and Todd kind of have this arrangement not to take each other on rewards, and Amanda takes Todd anyways. But I think there is that little bit of concern that Todd is the type of person that you leave him behind, he might flip things on you. And in Survivor, sometimes it pays to be just that little bit too paranoid at
Mhm.
times.
And then we have David versus Goliath, where we wind up with the final three on the reward together. And we have Nick winning the reward and taking Angelina and Mike. This is the whole ladder incident, that whole thing too. But they have this reward together, and bringing these people could also help solidify an end game as well. You have, the opportunity to talk to people more closely, and yes, it might be fueling them for future challenges, but it could also fuel your own game socially.
And I think that's the interesting thing about rewards in general. Obviously, Nick kind of gets this inadvertent aspect to this reward too, where it happens to be at the exact spot Angelina needs to be to get the idol she already has a clue for. And it just happens. I'm sure that was totally a coincidence, and the producers didn't intentionally make this setup there
No.
because Angelina doesn't go on this reward. She can't use that time to find the idol, but
Mhm.
she does go on the reward. And like you said, right? Like Nick kind of uses this as an ability to solidify his bonds with Mike and with Angelina. And because of that, like this is the nuance of rewards in Survivor. And this is why we can keep talking about these decisions of who you take on rewards. This is, yeah, okay, you're fueling your competition. At this point, it's final 6 in David versus Goliath,
Mhm.
which means you still have Kara there, you still have Alice in there, and you still have um who's the other member of the final 6 in that season?
Davey?
Davey there, right? So are Angelina and Mike your biggest competition? Probably not. But is this a strategic decision to build that social bond and also potentially like give them a bit of fuel so
Mhm.
that they can, compete better in an immunity challenge? Maybe.
And it's also, like we were talking about before, a clear peace of mind, even though I don't think Mike White came out of that with a clear mind. He had a few glasses of wine. But it also gives you that like clear peace of mind where if Mike was like, "Oh, I don't think I could beat Nick. I have to take him out." That's also a risk, some risk you take with bringing someone on reward, because you talk end game and then they could be like, "Oh no, I I don't want to go with you," or "Yeah, that sounds perfect for me. I think I can beat you, so I'm going to take you."
Yeah, and it's a tricky thing. And then that's why when a reward happens at like final 6 like this, again, these are even number splits. Right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm so glad we didn't see an even number split because maybe something could have happened. I know nothing did happen in 48, but something potentially could have
Yeah.
in the right situation.
Moving on to Outlast. We are talking duos at the end. We have 2 sets of duos in Joe and Eva and Kyle and Camilla at the final 4 here, and something's got to budge. We know it's not Joe or Eva. So it's either Kyle and Camilla are trying to stick together or they break up. And we see here that they decide to break up. And so Joe and Eva, as long as fire is like, as long as they win fire, Joe and Eva are making it to the final 3 together.
It's very interesting because as we progressed towards the end of season 48, it became very clear this idea that the best way I can win is by sitting beside Joe and Eva. Part of that might be because of David's acting on the jury, where he seemed really upset the entire time. So everyone just assumed he was upset at Joe about it. Part of it could have been the fact that they just felt like Joe and Eva, obvious duo, they'll just split the votes, not that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it could have been just that they felt like they were playing better games than Joe and Eva. But we saw that narrative over the last 2 episodes, right? Like we saw it come up in the finale a lot. We saw it come up in that Shaheen episode as well. Even though Shaheen did kind of propose the opposite, where he's like, maybe we do need to get rid of them. I think that was more of a get him to final 3 rather than a win final 3 suggestion. But duos don't often make it to the end together, especially pairs of duos. And season 48, as Jeff told us before the season, is a season of duos, despite the fact that there were 2 duos in this entire season. So clearly they were going to make it to the final 4. We have seen
a season of duos is Australian Survivor. That was a season of duos. This one only had 2.
Yeah, exactly. But another season that has let's just start with the season that has the obvious duo, right? Like, let's go back to All Stars. Let's talk about the fact that, and this one, you might be thinking, what pairs of duos are there really? Yeah, because obviously there's Rob and Amber, who are the Survivor duo. But I think a lot of people, if you haven't watched All Stars recently, kind of forget that Jenna and Rupert were absolutely a duo in that season.
Yeah, 100%. They survived his let's dig under the ground for a shelter. And the swap and everything. They stayed together through all the trials and tribulations of that game and stuck it out and worked together. We also have duos in All Stars going back to the final 6 because Tom and Alicia were kind of put as a duo as well because they were old Shapira. So we were looking at Rob and Amber as the duo, Rupert and Jenna as the duo, and sort of Tom and Alicia because they were like the 2 old Shapira left. So it was like Rob and Amber are in the power position, and which side do they go with?
Yeah.
So it's like a rough duo for Tom and Alicia, but again, once we get to that final 4, we have those 2 strong allied duos.
I think that the Tom and Alicia duo is kind of broken up by the fact that Sheehan sneaks her way in there with that immunity win, which breaks up when they're voted out. But I agree. And Tom was obviously also really close with Rob the entire season. But yeah, the idea of Rupert and Jenna versus Rob and Amber, it was so fascinating, right? And then when we get into the final 3, where it's this idea, when we get to the point where everyone votes Rupert in that final 4, and this is the determination, are you sticking with your own duo, going to try and force fire making here, or are you going to do the thing that gets you to final 3 so that all you have to do is win a challenge that, Jenna Lewis probably had a really good chance of winning.
Yeah. I want to mention our second moment here so we can talk kind of all 3 of them at the same time, and that is Philippines, obviously. Malcolm and Denise and he who shall not be named and Lisa. It was kind of an automatic assumption that Lisa and he would go and be in the finale, and Malcolm and Denise were to split up. So Malcolm and Denise wound up being the Kyle and Camilla. Rob and Amber and Rupert and Jenna are a little bit different because it is a final 2. But we have situations where they talk about things before the immunity challenge, like Camilla saying, "Hey, Kyle, like, probably going to be one of us going and not both." And then Malcolm does the same thing after he wins the reward. And he's like, "Yeah, Denise, I don't know if I'm going to go with you." And then they get into sticky situations of, wait, we need to make fire. Like, can you put me in fire? Can you help me out here? Or can you bring me to the end? Like they all, I think, get put in these, oh, I have to backpedal now situations. Even though Camilla understood that either her or Kyle will be in the end and the other is in fire, and didn't force the hey, Kyle, let's rethink this and both go to the end. Um, it's still interesting to look at how in Philippines, which is the episode we're watching on the Patreon, $1 million question, season 25 Philippines finale. So watch that so you can listen to us on Saturday. But it was just like, oh, I feel like you shouldn't have said that before the immunity challenge.
Yeah, but at the same time, if we look at the Philippine situation, right? Like Denise approaches Malcolm and tries to get him to commit to a final three, and he's wishy-washy about it. And if
Yeah,
he's not
that's what I'm
wishy,
saying.
if
Malcolm
he
should not have been
if
wishy-washy
he's not
about
washy about that, does Denise take him then? Like, does Denise force fire with him?
he. Maybe,
Maybe, maybe.
maybe
I don't
like
think it was in her best interest.
he has a better shot
Yeah.
than he
Whereas, like,
did.
I think one of the questions that come up in the finale is, was Kyle actually thinking this? Okay, I need to cut Camilla before
I
Camilla
don't
suggested it to
think he
Kyle.
was.
I don't know. I would love. I haven't looked at the extensive exit interviews for Kyle yet, but I'd like to look into them to find out like what his thought process was and if that was an idea before Camilla really
'Cause
suggested it.
we already know, and I don't know if the people on the island knew, Kyle was struggling with head and heart. And
Mhm.
so if you put him in that situation to force either take me or your best opportunity at winning is to put me in fire, like, then you're kind of toying with him a little bit to, like, maybe it will work out, maybe his heart will surpass his head. So I think Kyle, in the specific instance, if you push him for this decision, he may or may not go your way.
Mhm. Yeah, it really could go either way, but
But
it's
Camilla
just,
gave him the permission, essentially,
and that's the big thing, right? And then that's what we get in All Stars as well,
with
right? Like
Rupert and
like
Jenna.
Rob and Amber are never giving each other permission
Yeah,
to do
but
anything, right?
it it's interesting with Rupert and Jenna that, like, Jenna's like, "I wanna move forward, Rupert." And
Yeah.
Rupert's like, "But what? But please." And
Mhm.
she's like, "I think I can do this. Goodbye."
I think if anything, this just goes to show. And again, this is going to be an opinion of anyone watching, but I think this is one of those things where if this was a vote instead of forced fire making, this might have been a really interesting Final Four.
Mhm. Yeah, I think so too. Because you have the uh, you have the force of Joe and Eva being like, "Your decision.
Mhm.
You let Camilla go or not?"
I think that
'Cause
would be
and
a
it
little bit,
flips the power.
yeah, it would be a little bit more compelling. I mean, yes, we get that again, that like heartwarming moment of I heartwarming is maybe not the best way to describe it, but it has those heartwarming moments in it of like Eva's episode, which she said was way worse than what they showed on the episode. And Joe going over there to comfort her, and like they didn't show Kyle going over there to comfort her, and like stepping up and like saying, "Okay, do you want me to take this for you? Like you don't have to do this." And Eva having the resilience and the dedication to proving herself in the game and being like,
Mhm.
"No, I have to do this myself." Sure, we have that moment. I personally would way rather have the strategic conversation of Kyle having to mull over, okay, does it make more sense for me to cleanly vote out Camilla here Or do I take my person who I have had an alliance with this entire time and give them the opportunity to make fire? Which apparently Camilla wasn't that great at.
Yes. So I mean, this was a very interesting finale and very interesting to compare it to the Philippines finale as well. So like I said, make sure you watch that. John, it's been a great season.
Has been. Do you have any closing thoughts on 48 right now? Like, just like to sum it up, like what you really liked about the season and where you hope Survivor's going in the future?
I liked now I'm one of loyalty, and like I have an ally, stick to the end, or I have a group and want to just go with it. Like I find myself in like some similar mindsets to Eva, where she was like, I have a group of 4, or I have a group of 6, I have a group of whatever. We're gonna take it to the 6. We're gonna and I appreciated seeing more of a gameplay style that was in line with mine
Mhm.
and how I like to play certain things of like, I'm going to be loyal to us. And then once we get down to it, I have made my onion and go from there. So it was nice to see people wanting to that challenges mattered to certain people, that loyalty mattered to certain people, and I get that a lot of people want the backstab and the blind side, but we have so many seasons of that. It was nice to have people being like, I'm buff and I like challenges and want to win them, and it means something to me. So that's why I really appreciated David's question of how did you utilize the necklace
Mhm.
to your advantage? Because I feel like immunity wins are discounted when it comes to final tribal council.
Especially nowadays
Mhm.
in
So
the superfan era. I think looking back at 48, is it my favorite season? No. Is it probably going to end up in like my bottom 25% of seasons? Probably, because it is a little boring. But I think what's really important for us as a community to remember, like, we kind of get stuck in this echo chamber a lot on the internet of how we're feeling about Survivor. And especially those who are tuning into a podcast about Survivor or active on Survivor Twitter and Reddit and all of those forums and everything. We really care about this game. And I
Mhm.
think Survivor 48 is a really important season for us to have, for us all to realize what we love about Survivor.
Yeah.
Because this is a season that it didn't resonate with a lot of the die-hard fans, right? The die-hard people who love the strategic side of the game, who like seeing that cutthroat, backstabbing nature of the game, and seeing people kind of outmaneuver and outplay people. They aren't big fans of these seasons where we sit there and we see a strong alliance just take the game to the end.
Mhm.
But that's a small percentage of the overall like 4 million people watching this show every week.
Yeah.
And like that Facebook crowd, they love this type of gameplay.
Mhm.
This is the type of gameplay for some people. There are people who love it. I've seen a lot of like criticism, like Jeff's ability to be in tune with the fans when he said like, this is a great season, you're all gonna love it. He might not be in tune with like the super duper gamer
Yeah,
fans.
but yeah, this season could have gotten some casuals because they saw the moment of the season,
Mhm.
a clip on Facebook or something, and are just like, "Wow, let
Yeah.
me see, let me get back into Survivor, or let me, watch this season," or something like that.
And again, like this is a historic season. This is a season that for the first time ever, Survivor re-aired an episode on weekend prime time. We kind of forget that because it happened so many weeks ago now,
Mhm.
but that happened. And that is so important for Survivor and the growth of Survivor. It's so exciting moving into 49 and 50. Obviously, 50 is going to be this massive celebration, but like, don't let 49 sink to the end. I really hope the editing's a little bit better in 49 and that this cast gets the due that they rightfully deserve
Mhm.
for
Well, with a
going
guy
out.
like Riz God on your
Of
season.
course, but going out there going out to play this season. I know they've just come back from playing this season. I'm really excited to see what they bring to the Survivor community. I'm really excited for September and just the future of Survivor.
Mhm.
Yes, I'm a little down on this season. It wasn't my favorite. I find it a little boring. We'll see how it is on a rewatch. I'm a little concerned that like some of the confessionals might be a bit repetitive episode to episode on a binge, but we'll see when I eventually get there and eventually get to binging the new era again. But ultimately, a bad season of Survivor is still Survivor. And that's what I love about it, right? Like that is what Survivor is. That's why we're all here. That's why you are all listening to us still 45 minutes into this podcast, the end of the season, with Survivor 50 news right around the corner. It's so exciting. McKenna, this is why we do this. This is why we love doing this. And this is why we will keep doing this.
Speaking of keeping doing this, John, what will be going on in the Specialist universe this upcoming little bit?
Phil and Blake broke down with their immediate reactions to the finale last night after the episode. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you go check that out. Will comes in and inadvertently makes a milk reference that was really weird, but it's there. It's there. Earlier today, Phil had exit press with the 5 finalists. Very exciting. First time in Specialist history that we've gotten all 5 finalists for exit press. So super important. Go check those out. They're short interviews, but they are very insightful. They give a lot of information about the game. Definitely worth your time to check them out. Not directly after this, but pretty soon at 11 p.m. Eastern, Phil and Will be giving their last impressions on the season. A day removed from the finale. It should be really interesting to see how their tones shifted in the last 24 hours. That'll be very good. And then next Wednesday, I mean, it's the time we're all waiting for, right? The Survivor 50 cast will drop Wednesday morning. Phil and Will be talking at 10 p.m. Eastern time. Yes, a little late in the day, but you're still getting it day of. Actually, I think it's Phil, Will, and hopefully like Blake and Tegwith will be there as well. As many of the specialists will be there as possible to kind of talk through this Survivor 50 cast and lead us up to a very exciting offseason. We're not 100% sure what McKenna and I will be doing in the offseason yet, but there'll probably be something. So make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, because just because Survivor's off the air doesn't mean the specialists are. We will be here all off season long.
All right. Later, everyone.